Our ECOWAS is plagued with neo-colonialism. Oh yes, our economic community of West African states, the ECOWAS, CEDEAO as they say in French, is infected by a cancer that has lodged itself in the heart of the ECOWAS, calling herself neo-colonialism. Neo-colonialism, the question is, what is neo-colonialism? We can only understand what is neo-colonialism if we can relate the two with colonialism. And therefore, we find ourselves in the middle of historical accounts. The best place for us to start understanding that, given the experience of where ECOWAS is today, the challenges that ECOWAS is today divided, as once upon a time America was divided, that led to their civil war. The best place for us to start understanding what is neo-colonialism is to go into the history of the United States of America, and what we call the ECOWAS today. They share a lot in common. And our job is to look at what we got wrong, for which, having gone through this journey, we form a body called the ECOWAS Parliament Reform Movement. That is the only way out for us to give ourselves a chance. Now, quickly, let me take you through the history of the United States of America, where the word colonialism, neo-colonialism, came into what we know today. The United States of America at a point in time was nothing but a land of the indigenous people of America. And in this land, the European powers at the time, who desperately needed raw materials, trying to trade with the African continent, the rest of the world, and America, realized that in West Africa there is a problem of chicha fly and mosquito, so they can't settle down there. So, on realizing that on the American continent they can settle down, the place is good, there is a need to conquer and take over land that today constitute what you call the United States of America. When they took the land, like you have on the African continent, kingdoms, tribal kingdoms, each land, Mississippi, Alabama, all these places, either they changed the name or kept the name Buffalo. What they did was they took the land, especially the British, because the Spanish were in Mexico, French and British somewhere around Canada, and in South America you have Brazil, and a lot of it the Spanish. So what happened in the area where the British Empire established itself was they took over all the territories one by one, and in each place they put in their governor. By so doing, the British Empire under the king was introducing his laws, because the laws of a territory determine the technology, the economics, and the politics of the area. The king chose people directly to rule those places, while people from outside, from Britain, went to settle down in these areas. Those who settled down were in colonies. And in colonies, like I said, there is a direct law. That's what we call direct law. Direct law. The source of the law is directly from the Palace of Buckingham, here, the King's Palace. And those there are all from the House of Lords to rule, because their job is to be taking instruction from the king. That is colonization, direct rule. And therefore, the technology in America, the economics in America, the politics in America, at that time, the colonies were British directly ruled. At a point in time, the settlers started seeing themselves as different people, and therefore, the need to to fight for independence. They happened to be fighting the same law. They were fighting against the same law. And therefore, the governors, as the British have located them there, the political authority, the economics, and the technology started playing each other. At that time, when they sell to the British natural resources for which they were formed, they pay tax. When they buy from manufactured goods, they pay tax to the Americans. And by law and all intent, no one must have any industry on the land of America, because everything has to be exported into Britain. That went on for a long time. But after some time, the Americans fought for independence, and they got their independence. By independence, they've separated themselves now. They are not going to take instruction from the king as part of the British Empire. They separated themselves. But when they did that, what happened was that they formed a union, a very loose union, and that they started experiencing what we call neo-colonization. In other words, the American independent state started having the laws imposed on them from Britain, from the colonizers, but this time indirectly. So the choice of the politicians were indirectly, the economic was indirectly, the technology of America was indirectly controlled by the ex-colonizer. And that is neo-colonization. And that is where the word comes from, until Abraham Lincoln came on the stage and they fought the Civil War to re-establish the law of America. Today, the law of America that get its power from the parliamentarians, the Congress, elected directly by the people of America, determine everything. And today, the Americans themselves are now the new colonizers of other people. Let's move fast forward to ECOWAS. Remember, we cannot talk about the history of ECOWAS without talking about the history of the OAU, which later became the African Union. And we can't talk about the history of OAU without talking about the history of the EEC, European Economic Community. And we can't talk about the EEC without talking about the United Nations. And we can't talk about the history of the United Nations without talking about the First and the Second World Wars, especially the Second World War that ended in 1945. So, 1945, UN was formed. 1956, EEC was formed. 1963, OAU was formed. 1975, ECOWAS was formed. You can see there is a trend all along. 1945, and let me remind you, the war between the Germans and the rest of the European powers was not won by Britain or France. The war was won by the Soviet Union and the United States of America. Their involvement, if not because of their involvement, that war will have ended up with the German winning. It was the Soviet Union and the United States that won the war. When they finish, the condition is now they will be moving on. So colonizers should hand over all their colonies. They should give them independence. France, Britain, anyone who own a territory, who control a territory as a colony, that is a territory where you make law over them, make law for them directly, must stop. So there must be another way. Soviet Union now was pushed aside. Today they are back in Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. And on the other hand, you have United States of America that succeeded working with the Europeans, and now they've re-established what we call neo-colonization. Neo-colonization on the whole continent. Neo-colonization in ECOWAS. Neo-colonization everywhere. Neo-colonization is a kind of colonization that is not directly. So the laws are not made directly. And therefore, the politicians are not choosing directly by the colonizers. The economics is not directly seen to be controlled by the colonizers because the laws are not directly made. And the technology is also indirectly affected. And this is what you have on the African continent and in most part of the world. How do we get ourselves out of this is what I will be coming to make another video to shed more light into, so that there will be a clearer understanding of how to defeat neo-colonization, especially in ECOWAS.